We're going to think about two main examples. The first one is assimilation. So when we say assimilation, we mean that a government or a society feels that new people, new integrants, so immigrants, will have to fit in, will have to be the same. That's the meaning of the word assimilate, to become the same as something else, to fit in. So in this idea of multiculturalism, minority groups, not just immigrants, but perhaps minority groups related to indigenous cultures that were already living in the area before colonialism, are told to fit in, that in order to be successful, meaningful members of society, in order to even be a citizen of society, they must fit into the majority culture. That could be to do with clothing, could be to do with language, it could be to do with even the way in which people live, the kind of houses they live in, or the way they think of ownership of land and houses. This was historically favored in colonial countries, like Canada. Canada is an interesting example because its approach to multiculturalism has changed enormously over the years. But at the beginning, there was very much an idea of assimilation. Argentina in South America would be another example. And also India. So if we think about the British Empire in India, in order for people to be really accepted by the British government, they had to fit into certain British roles, British ways of living, British ways of speaking. So the main problems with this approach to multiculturalism would be the three we have here. The first one is a loss of cultural identity. That means if you have to assimilate to a majority culture, you lose a huge part of what makes you you. You lose a part of your history. You lose your connection to your family. In a lot of cases, for example, in Canada, there were forced boarding schools. Those were boarding schools where people were taken away, well, children were taken away from their families and taught to live in a more Anglo-focused British way of living. So this also has another issue, which is obviously the preference for majority culture. So the people who are members of the dominant or majority culture obviously have life much easier than people that are members of minority groups, because everything is designed for them, for their way of living, for their language, and for their lifestyles. Another issue that this can give rise to is discrimination. So when we see a preference for one culture, one way of living, one way of speaking, then this can often lead to discrimination because another culture is seen as being less important than the majority culture.